Chapter 131 to 133. I took a deep breath, sweat dripped down my brow. I ignored the few stray strands of hair that fell down on my face. My legs crossed, wings out as I hovered about 10 feet into the air, a floating book in front of me and the boosted gear on my arm. I ignored the pain in my body as I turned the page. There was a small twitch in one of my wings and I fell about an inch before catching myself. My swords floated around me, my mental strength also keeping them afloat. But that was not all. My sword of destruction was channeling my aura, so my power of destruction was activated around the blade. It didn't run wild, instead, it was coherent, complacent. It was evenly distributed all around, coating it in the blackish hue, only instigated into action by my will. Do it again. I took another deep breath. Boost. I called out, doubling my capabilities once more. This must have been the 8th boost now, and I felt my body grow stronger, but at the same time, the strain was enough that I let out a growl. As the power flowed through another force was exerted, the runes I set up all around this room lit up, and a torrent of gravity descended upon me, threatening to force me onto the ground. I grit my teeth, adjusting to the new force, not letting myself fall too far, and not allowing my swords to fall either. My focus did not waver, my power of destruction did not go out of control, and I adjusted to the new weight around me. This room, an empty place I had found in the college to train. I had received permission from the Archmage to set this little place up. All around me were runes, designed to adjust the force of gravity on an individual. It was a bit annoying getting set up right, but I couldn't complain about the results. Normally, such a thing would have been tedious, but otherwise simple. What I had done was add a secondary sequence that increases every time I use boost, except it doesn't merely match my new strength. If I use the boosted gear to increase my abilities by a factor of 2, the gravitational exertion is increased by 2.1, meaning I could train myself in multiple ways, both from the stress of the boosted gear and the force exerted on me. And that didn't even take into account my mental exertion to keep my swords up, my flight up, and my power of destruction going. I pushed off the thoughts of pain, instead focusing on the book in front of me. One of several I had acquired from the Archmage's personal library, or rather the books he keeps segregated so new initiates can't just get their hands on them by accident. They weren't all, blow this city up, kind of thing. A lot of them were spells that an initiate could use, but were extremely dangerous and needed a firmer grasp on magical arts to fully understand and utilize without harming yourself. And then there were others that were just, malicious by design. I'm not one that likes to label spells evil, but there were certainly some horrible spells in his collection. Not that I faulted him for keeping them, they were useful for understand and learning from, even if you never intended to use them. Like there was a spell that forced another person to fall in love with you. It was a disgusting amalgamation of different mind control magics with an unhealthy dose of brain chemistry altering. But on the flip side, it had a very interesting thought process on combining spells without conflicting with one another, but instead becoming greater than the sum of its parts. The spell I was studying at the moment was called Lightning Form. It was a spell derived from the lightning cloak spell I was quite familiar with. To put it bluntly, it forces the body to take on the properties of lightning, so to speak. It would heavily increase my affinity to the element, but it was irreversible, from what I read. The downside was the fact that the process was extremely painful and dangerous, not to mention I wouldn't be able to use a similar spell, otherwise I'd probably die. Using terms from my home world, it would force the concept of lightning onto my being with everything good and bad that comes with that. My element would thus change, not replacing the old one, but adding a second. There were many factors that come into play when dealing with something like this, but I had many tools at my disposal to mitigate the detriments. What do you think, Drake? It's not a bad idea. I'm sure I don't need to tell you about all the dangers and everything. But you seem more particular towards the element of lightning. It will make other elements a little harder to utilize, but that doesn't mean much. And since your runes aren't direct elemental manipulation, they won't be affected, but would be enhanced due to your lightning affinity when using some of your personal spells. Yeah, most of the detriments are about gaining the ability, not the effects of simply having it. Which admittedly, were a long list, not many mages could boast what I could when it came to preparation. Hell, my aura mitigated an awful lot of problems talked about in the book. You're up again. I grunted, gritting my teeth, preparing. Boost, I called out, holding it for a moment until the gravity descended upon me again. I let out a pained cry as I slammed into the stone floor below, cracking the surface. The magics turned off by a safety measure built in by design. Release. I breathed out, letting the boosts fade and leaving my body aching. My swords impaled themselves onto the ground near me, my power of destruction dissipating and retreating along the linkage of my aura, returning to me. Not bad, you lasted longer than yesterday by a noticeable margin. I rolled over, back onto the ground, letting my body sprawl out. This is the 4th day. 5th day. Drake corrected. Oh, time just seemed to blend together. I muttered, letting my breath return to something normal. I moved my arms but was only greeted by an aching pain. No pain, no gain as they say. I let out a sigh, sitting myself up. Wilhelm. I heard a familiar voice call out, opening the wooden door. Turning around, I saw the Archmage enter. Have you come to check up on your prisoner? I asked. Wilhelm. The Archmage gave me a dry look. Just because this room was a holding cell some centuries ago does not make you a prisoner. He deadpanned. The outside world, I can't handle it anymore. Let me stay here, it's all I know. I gasped. Okay. He didn't even bat an eye at my antics. Shall I tell Miss Artoria and Tosaka that you have opted for a life behind bars? Boo. I pursed my lips, rolling back over gain. My arms were shaking and my legs wobbly as I stood up. Oh, Wilhelm. The Archmage came over to steady me. How much did you push yourself? Well, I'm still breathing, so probably not enough. I chuckled. At least, I think that's how Scathack would look at it. The Archmage sighed. Wilhelm, I can't claim to know much about your biology. He cast a look at my wings still out. But this can't be healthy to sustain over long periods. Long periods mean different things for dragons. Drake chimed in. The Archmage blinked, staring at my gauntlet. I can't argue with that logic. Still, perhaps a break is in order. As I said, Miss Artoria and Miss Tosaka have returned, and they have had a wonderful experience if their excitement is anything to go by. Alright, I'll head there in a moment. I nodded. I hadn't seen Artoria in over a week, I miss my little knight. And I wanted to hear about Rin's adventures, I hope she had a fulfilling time. The Archmage nodded. I see you were reading Lightning Form, what do you think? It's an interesting avenue to pursue, and I can seemingly sidestep many of the detriments with some effort and preparation. Yes, I thought that one may catch your eye. He rubbed his chin, a small smile on his face. I had to take it from the library when I had a pair of brothers try to learn it together some decades ago. Oh geez, how bad did that end? Well, they at least managed to get a basic lightning bolt down before attempting it. He sighed. I managed to save their lives, but their ability to manipulate magicka was thoroughly shattered. He eyed me sternly. I appreciate the cautionary tale, but I'm not going to just jump head first into this. I tried to alleviate his concerns. I have many things available to me to not suffer any horrific setbacks even if I decided to throw caution to the wind. As long as you are careful. He nodded, clearly pleased with my words. I also look forward to your thoughts after you succeed. If we could tweak it, it would be a wonderful spell for those who specialize in lightning destruction. That's true. He probably didn't have any data to even start an endeavor. Well, I wouldn't mind helping him out, if nothing else I do love to discuss magic. Sure, I'll make sure to note my attempts down and to have everything documented so we can go over it at some point. Wonderful. He cheerfully replied. Now, let's not keep your lady friends waiting. I happily pushed over the doors to the cafeteria, because where else would I find Artoria? Joking aside, I think they were just here to unwind with some space to set some stuff out. The Archmage was already here and as soon as I walked in I drew their attention. Wilhelm. Artoria perked up, a smile on her face and my heart just melted. I held my arms out and she happily moved forward into my embrace. Artoria. I did squeeze her tight. Missed you. Did you have fun? She let out a small noise in confirmation. Only breaking our hug after another moment. Come, we have a grand tale to regale you with. She grabbed my hand, pulling me over to the table. I took another look at them. Artoria wasn't in her usual armor, she was sporting some local leathers with some other comfortable-looking furs to not stand out so much. Along with a hooded cloak adorning her back. Rin too looked interesting. I met her eyes briefly and she returned a haughty smile, hand on her hip and a happy gleam in her eye. She looked much different. Full leather armor, but with what looked like a mage's robe fitted over, acting like a cloak. I could only tell because of the parts not covered, her arms, a bit of her chest, her legs. She was clearly decked out in armor, and from what I could tell, it was clearly enchanted. I briefly wondered if it was by her own hand or not. She had a staff in her hand I did not recognize, but it seemed pretty decent. Her noble phantasm was on her back, for ease of use. She had a dagger at her hip and other accessories all around. But the most eye-catching item was the amulet that hung from her neck. What a feeling it gave when I inspected it. Obviously, she was allowing me this kind of poking, otherwise such an action could be easily differed. I think I'm jealous. I blinked as I eyed that ridiculous thing around her neck. Am I allowed to be jealous? I looked down at Artoria. She just let out a small laugh. I'll allow it. Rin flipped her hair back, obviously emphasizing the thing even more. I rolled my eyes, but I was happy. Rin seemed a lot more alive than when I saw her last. Alright, I want answers. I jabber my finger at her amulet. The hell is that thing, because it's frankly ridiculous. I almost thought it was a Daedric artifact. No, but it is an item of legendary proportions. The Archmage chimed in. Miss Tosaka was kind enough to allow me a few cursory looks. I said you could look at it as much as you wanted. Rin huffed. The Archmage chuckled. I have enough. I merely was interested in its overall creation. Without breaking it apart, I can't get much more from it unless you were willing to part from it for a few years. Rin looked aghast at the thought, earning another chuckle from the old mage. Alright, you can show off. Tell me what it does. I sat down at the table, Rin joining me quite quickly. The Archmage just stood nearby, content on watching and hearing the story while Artoria slid in next to me, as we shared another small smile. From what I've discovered so far, Rin began. It provides a potent passive healing effect. A small cut would heal in moments, a broken arms would probably take a few hours, and I haven't tested any missing limbs for obvious reasons. She stated, clearly in a type of lecture mode. Interesting, have you tried other avenues of healing? Like his hair restored, or fingernails? It would be interesting if it stops the process of aging. I asked. Rin paused, pondering those questions. I'll need to test it more. She admitted, and I just nodded as she continued. My physical stamina is higher. I noticed I could hike through the mountains a lot longer before feeling winded. I can vouch for this one. Artoria chimed in. She went from needing a break every few hours to going nearly all day without issue. Fascinating. I rubbed my chin. I'm sure that isn't it though. I ginned at her. I could tell she was holding something back. My capacity for magical energy at least doubled while wearing this thing. She looked rather smug. It has a sort of magica pool I can draw from and refills separately from my own, but doesn't conflict when I actualize any of my spells. Now that is really interesting. Does it refill separately from your own, or does it fill up by siphoning your own magical energy? It draws from the world, my own OD is left untouched. Rin confirmed. I admit to being a little jealous, maybe it was just my hoarding nature acting up in front of a treasure. But I was honestly happy for her too. She also looked a lot more spirited, like a weight was off her shoulders. The treasures are good and all, but how about the details? Tell me of your adventure. I shot her a smile and she beamed back at me. Well, it started when we went looking for a tomb called Falgunther over by Solitude. Artoria reached out under the table, sliding her hand into mine as our fingers intertwined, and she laid her head on my shoulder as we let Rin begin to recount the tales of her adventure. Seeing Rin excitedly start to recant the tale, I couldn't help but smile. Even with how fatigued I was feeling at this moment, everything just felt right in the world. So we made it to this big tomb, lots of undead everywhere. Rin had explained their journey to delve into this lost crypts. I thought the place was already cleared out, because there were no zombies walking around. Draugr, I corrected. Draugr. She nodded. So there were no Draugr walking around. We walk into a new room, lots of coffins, and there was a treasure chest. Oh gods, did you go straight for it? I face-palmed. She went straight for it. Artoria said dryly. Rin turned a little red. As soon as I touched it, all the coffins in the room had their lids kicked open and a stupid amount of Draugrs all stepped out. So, you engaged them. I nodded to her words. In such an enclosed space, I assume you stuck to your spear and perhaps some small cantrips. No. Artoria deadpanned. They startled me. Rin defended herself, casting a huff towards Artoria. They startled you? I gave her a dry look. And what happened when they startled you, dot? Blew them the hell up. Rin preened. I looked towards Artoria. That is an unfortunately apt description of what occurred. Artoria sighed. She screamed and threw one of her rubies into the middle of the room, destroying most of them in the blast. Saber. Rin huffed. We shared a laugh at her expense, but she didn't seem particularly distressed. I think this trip of hers was the best thing that's happened to her in many months. How about the traps? Those places are usually infested with the things. Oh God, tell me about it. Rin groaned. Who puts jars of oil hanging on the ceiling? I just started saying, fuck it, and forced my way through them all. Yes, Rin shared a similar mindset. Artoria sighed again. Blew them up. I hazarded a guess. Hee hee. Rin let out an awkward laugh. Alright, so navigated the ancient tomb filled with undead and traps, what was at the end? I asked. Well, according to the journals, these places were actually prisons for the sons of this amulet's original owner and maker. Rin explained. I don't know the specifics, but they took the amulet when he died, and broke it up into 3 pieces. They were tyrants, ruling over the land until they were finally put down and sealed away. Fascinating. The Archmage finally spoke up, content to just listen in with amusement. You still possess these journals? Of course. Rin puffed up. I knew you would want them. But, everything's kind of jumbled together in my bag after an accident. If you don't mind, I can get them to you after sorting everything. No rush. The Archmage waved her off. Please continue. This Draugr was able to use magic, and he was really good. He was able to teleport short distances, and his elemental mastery was surprising. Rin let out a sigh. Honestly, I was taken by surprise. If not for Saber's magic resistance, I don't know if it would have gone as smoothly. Well, you know better now, right? I doubt any more magic-wielding undead took you by surprise from then on. I tried to soothe. She did well. Artoria also chimed in. The fight was not long, but she was able to support me as we took it down and claimed the amulet piece and its treasure as our own. They were durable, but not very fast. Rin added. Ah, reinforcement is quite the good spell. Most people using magic here had just bluntly forced the magical energy to elevate their body beyond normal means. That, or they simply exist at a much higher starting place, similar to how humans were back home in the Age of Gods. Really, the most thorough strengthening spell I found here was Ebony Flesh, and its lesser equivalents. And even that mainly strengthened, as opposed to reinforcement that increased every aspect of the body. It's quite curious now that I think about it, but thoughts for later. Draugr have an innate resistance against magic themselves, as well. I tapped my chin. Their necrotic nature simply makes spells have a lesser effect, though I suppose it's slightly different than actual magic resistance. Well, they burned well enough. Rin shrugged. Yup, that'll do it. They're weak against fire, for obvious reasons. There are probably some spells in the Restoration School that also repel and harm them. Since the healing magic is the antithesis to undead, they should be able to deal quite a bit of damage. I didn't think about that. Rin looked lost in thought for a moment. I'll have to test that at some point. She muttered to herself. Well, regardless, what happened next? We basically did the same thing again. Took a couple days of traveling, though we found someone willing to take us in cart most of the way there for some gold. Same kind of crypt, but this one had a bow and teleported around, was kind of annoying because it made clones of itself, but none of them were actually real until only one remained. Did you find any books or anything about a spell like that? No. Rin grumbled. And I looked all over, turned up every stone. She means that literally. Artoria added. Well done. I gave Rin a thumbs up, one she mirrored with a grin. More treasure, though. Hell yes. Rin pumped her fist in the air. Lots of good things, gold, jewels, weapons, that kind of stuff. You're going to be so jealous. Am I now? I raised an eyebrow. Shall I tell you of my adventure when you're done? My lips curled up. What? What did you do when we were gone? Not much, just killed the oldest vampire in Skyrim, looted his castle. I casually inspected my nails. Bullshit. Rin slammed her hands on the table. I call bullshit. I let Harkin's sword fall onto the table. Oh no, the blade I got off that vampire lord. I feigned surprise. How did that get there? One of these days, Schweinorg, you and me. She raised her fist up threateningly. And put that thing away, it feels really weird. Yeah, it does. I didn't argue putting it back in my ring. Was going to have Meridia see if she could cleanse it of all the icky stuff. Are you going to add it to your growing arsenal? Artoria asked. Maybe just my collection, not to something I use for true combat. I scratched my cheek. I was just interested in the fact that it was a katana or something similar. A bit straighter and shorter, but also not a wakizashi, if slightly bigger than a normal one. That is true, I think Graham was a better sword and you opted to not set it to the side. Artoria agreed. Speaking of, I actually gave it to Thorum. It liked that fact that he apparently eats dragon souls. Curious, I would like to meet him at some point. Artoria gave a small smile. Of course, I think both of you would like him. He's a great guy. Yeah, we can meet your guy crush later. Let me finish my story. Rin interjected. Alright, Miss Grumpy, continue on. I gestured for her to continue. Funnily enough, she wasn't actually upset or even put off by our little back and forth. I think before she held back some thinly veiled jealousy, but now it was just sort of our dynamic. Alright, so we got the last two pieces of the amulet, but we needed to find a way to put them together. There was actually some notes and stuff left behind, a third tomb we were led to. Some sort of ritual site that required the pieces of the amulet to actualize. Once we did that, it seems like the spirits of those brothers were still latched onto the pieces, so the sort of piggy backed off the ritual to create a ghost-like body. Can you describe the ritual in detail? The Archmage asked. I had forgotten he was there briefly. Actually, I don't think he was all the way here, like a sort of avatar merely listening in when something interesting came up. I made a rough sketch before we left along with the notes to it and I wrote down some of my own observations as well. Rin stated. Oh my, well done Miss Tosaka. The Archmage gave out well-deserved praise. It truly is a boon to have you in my college. Rin puffed up happily. Of course. The fight was a little difficult. Artoria began. There were 3 opponents who were adept in magic and had some amount of martial skill behind them. Not to mention they lacked several weaknesses a living person would have, such as stamina. But they also lacked any kind of coordination. There were points where they almost fell over one another. Rin let out a little snort. The one with the bow actually shot the one with a sword in the head. The most difficult aspect was their teleporting. Artoria had a slight smile on her face. The room we fought them in was rather large, so they had quite a bit of room to maneuver. I took out the one with the bow and Artoria took out the other 2. Once we finished, the ritual combined the amulet and here we are. Rin finished. Well, it doesn't sound like they had any major issues, but they also left out a lot of details. But it would probably take hours to recount every little thing. And you guys didn't face anything outside of these tombs, no dragons? The skies were clear the entire time. I made sure to keep a watch out. Artoria reassured me. Yeah, the worst we ran into was a troll, but... You blew it the fuck up. I finished for her. Damn straight. Rin smirked. What about you, was this vampire strong? Yeah. I let out a sigh. And he was backed by a Daedric lord, someone who's an enemy of Meridia and wanted to lure me out. A trap I walked right into. He was a bit rusty though, so I was able to defeat him without much issue, but his mastery over blood magic was eye-opening. Blood magic? Rin repeated. Exactly as it sounds, to manipulate blood. You can think of it as a branching school of thought from water manipulation. Though it comes with its own good and bad points due to the nature of blood. Will, a person suddenly burst through the doors, her eye-catching blue skin making me recognize her immediately. Jin. I smiled brightly at her. Her eyes swept at those of us gathered. Rin, Artoria. She practically squealed in delight, running over and giving each a big hug. Rin looked a little surprised at first, but happy all the same. Artoria welcomed it without any fuss. Hello Jin. Artoria greeted. Jin. Rin nodded her way. I'm glad you both are back. Jin's smile was really contagious. Did you have fun? Were there new books you found? What's that around your neck? Did you fight any of those undead? What about spells, did you learn anything new? Or did you find any good treasure? She immediately began bombarding them with questions. Was always happy to see my genie this bright and ecstatic. Oh. Jin interrupted her own rambling. I actually had a quick question. She looked at me. I was going through the notes and journals from Harkin's stuff you left at the house, and I got kind of stuck because it mentioned something about an Elder Scroll, but I can't find. Pardon. The Archmage interrupted. Did you say an Elder Scroll? He seemed much more contracted on us than he was previously. But honestly, the hell was an Elder Scroll? An Elder Scroll. The Archmage rubbed his beard. I am surprised to find out that none of you have heard of them. While most knowledge has entered the realm of legends, people these days at least know the barest whispers. I guess they're common knowledge around here. He closed his eyes for a moment, before setting a large book down on the table that appeared out of nowhere. Opening it up, he skimmed several pages, finger running down the lines of the page. Here we are. He exclaimed. Also called the Edric Prophecies, are scrolls of unknown origin which simultaneously archive both the past and future events. The number of the scrolls is unknown not necessarily due to their immense quantity, but because the number itself is unknowable, as the scrolls do not exist in countable form. They are fragments of creation from outside time and space, and their use in divining prophecies is but a small part of their power. They simultaneously do not exist, yet always have existed. Fascinating. These scrolls exist outside of time and space, thus are able to chronicle the flow of the world somehow. That poses an interesting question. If someone reads from one of these Elder Scrolls, does that make the future, or is the scroll merely describing inevitable events? The chicken or the egg? Does bringing the scroll's content into reality force that recorded prophetic outcome to occur? So, they are basically cast off power from the divines when this world was created. Perhaps they crystallized and took on a new form. Existing outside of time and space means they can see the whole flow of events, latch onto something of some significance, something that has enough power or consequence in the world's existence to draw these wisps of divine power. Maybe the scrolls don't even exist as scrolls, but are merely perceived as such based on limited mortal comprehension. The Archmage blinked at me, seemingly surprised by my words. An interesting theory. He nodded. Alas, it is one of the mysteries of our world. All we know is that they contain valuable information, and cause anyone who reads them to lose their sight, a curse from the divines they say, for peering into the future. Is it a curse or is it just a side effect of looking into something mortals weren't supposed to see? Artoria asked. An interesting question. The Archmage smiled, but he just shrugged. We don't know. The nature of these Elder Scrolls simply makes them nearly impossible to study. Even in the past when there was a library full of them in the Empire, their nature simply made it unfeasible. I had a sudden thought. The prophecy regarding the Rum, it came from an Elder Scroll, didn't it? The Archmage gave a huge grin. I was wondering if you would guess that before I mentioned anything. He stroked his beard. Yes, it is an old prophecy, so much so that even the Nordic legends speak of it. I do not know when the scroll mentioning it was read, but it was many centuries ago. As interesting as this is, why is it important? Rin asked. Harkon was the name of the vampire lord I killed. I answered, tapping my chin. The question is, why was he looking for something like that? His notes are vague, at best. Jin sighed. Some of them are coded, some are just rantings and a few actually provide any insight. But knowing what I do now, there are a few more things I can look up. The Archmage suddenly turned around, like his attention was taken away. Something requires my undivided attention, pardon me. He disappeared. I just shrugged at his sudden departure. I didn't question it, he was undeniably very busy with everything going on. Any inkling on why Harkon was looking for an Elder Scroll? Well, some of his notes that talked about the Elder Scroll also mentioned their great enemy and referenced the sun, but otherwise I don't know. Jin replied. You sure he wasn't just bonkers? Rin asked. It's entirely possible, he did think consorting with Molag Bal, a second time, was a good idea, so who knows? I shrugged. I'm actually interested in this and everything, but I'm super out of it right now. Any chance we can go over this in the morning? Rin stated, and after taking another look she looked rather sluggish. I'm a bit weary from our travels as well. Artoria added. I want an actual bed, I'm tired of sleeping on the ground. Rin whined, head falling to the table. Well, I finally got my house anchored here, I have plenty of rooms over there. I offered. Oh, I can show you what I've done with the place. Jin said gleefully. You did more. Uh-huh. Jin nodded happily. Meridia was very helpful when getting everything sorted and helping me decorate. Huh. As strange as that is, I'm glad Meridia is spending time with Jin, they both need more friends. That reminds me, I turned to Rin. Did Meridia approach you about getting a phone made? No, was she supposed to? She mentioned it but may have gotten busy. Do you have the materials to start making more? I got most of the stuff, I just need some raw materials, most of which I can find here somewhere. Rin nodded. Probably going to need several more. God, you're such a man whore. Rin rolled her eyes. Jin needs one, obviously, the old man too, even if he probably already made one himself. Saber need her own. She began listing them off, making Artoria smile. Meridia, like you said. You want a couple for Yasaka and your daughter. And maybe one for Izzy in the future. I thought about it. You know, it might just be easier to make a sort of routing device, a mystic code that can direct real-time calls to us regardless of where we are due to the phones instead of everyone needing a phone. The thought just entered my head. Rin paused for a moment, deliberating. That would probably be more efficient, but I'm nowhere close to being able to do that right now. I'll need more data from this kaleidophones before I start creating any theories. That's fair. I couldn't really ask for much more. It would be a decent undertaking if the thought turned out to be fruitful. Just a random thought for later. I shrugged. It wasn't my intention to just heap some stuff onto her plate. Well, why don't we go check out my house? Please, I wasn't looking forward to sleeping on the beds here. Rin looked rather grateful. We walked through the front door, Rin and Artoria inspecting the area immediately. Did you really link it up with a closet at the college? Rin deadpanned. Well, you see. He put the house down over by Whiterun and forgot I can't open portals like he can. Jin said dryly. I'm not even surprised. Rin didn't react otherwise. So how does the plumbing and lights work here? I can't imagine the infrastructure would stay intact after using the kaleidoscope to pull it across several worlds. Magic. I smiled. She gave me a flat look. Fine. I grumbled. Actually, the house is in Yasaka's little pocket dimension that houses West Kyoto, home to a large portion of Japan's supernatural population. Mostly everything there is built through magical means, including the houses. The hot water heater is powered by magic. The lighting in here is powered by magic. There are several large-scale rituals all around the property that focus on pulling in magical energy and converting to for the house's purpose. Wait, really? Aren't those kinds of rituals rare back home? Rin looked surprised. Not in the way you think, there just isn't much in need for that kind of thing. Magical energy doesn't immediately denote mystery, which is why the Mages Association was built where it is. While the magical energy there is much denser than most other parts of the earth, it's the fact that Albion's corpse also exudes a very dense amount of mystery to saturate the area. Yes, such rituals are rare simply because everything is rare back home, not even because of resource problems. Every scrap of knowledge is hoarded like it's a treasure. I paused for a moment collecting my thoughts. If you think about it, many types of magic circles act just as these do, but on a smaller and more specific scale. I get it. Rin yawned, stretching her arms. I'll care more in the morning when I get a better look. For now, can you just show us around? Sure. I smiled, getting my bearings. Jin did a wonderful job decorating. It had a very welcoming feel. Artoria added as well. Meridia needs credit too, she did help me. Jin preened under the praise. Of course, when she's not busy, I'll make sure to pass it on. Really, I'm very lucky that all my girls are getting along like this. Anyways, let's start the tour. I began to lead them to the back. This is where I'm keeping my treasury. I pushed open a door, revealing an absurd amount of material wealth. I fucking hate you. Rin hissed. Your anger fuels my existence. I smiled, continuing onwards. A few doors down, I pushed into another room. And this is the library. My library. Jin corrected. Jin's library. I didn't argue. She's been doing a wonderful job of getting everything sorted and set up. There was even a table where she had been going over a bunch of journals, what I'm assuming were the ones that led her to us in the first place. Oh, it's still a mess. Wilhelm left me with a bunch of stuff to handle, and I've been going through it in my spare time. I would offer to help if I didn't know you enjoyed it. I gave her hand a little squeeze. Jin just giggled, leaning over to place a kiss on my cheek. Feel free to browse and take anything that catches your interest. Rin took a few looks around. Yeah, I'll definitely take you up on that. She mumbled, still clearly tired but a bit expectant. Alright, only one more important place to check out. I led them out once again. We moved towards the center of the house, where my anchor was located. It was moved to a less open location once everything settled. This is the heart of the house. I gestured as they all entered. The magics that keep it afloat, and where all the defenses pull their strength from. Speaking of, I might as well go over what I've got going on so far. There were stacks of talismans lined up, dozens of spell scrolls, and about 50 staves lined up on the walls, with much more of each to be coming. Basically, you got the standard package of bounded fields and anything else like that I thought to throw in. Then we have the next layer. If something can make it past those, then all of these activate at the whims of whoever is here at the time, most likely Jin, and they are bombarded with an uncountable number of spells. What happens if these are not enough? Artoria eyed everything. At that point, we're dealing with something beyond mortal abilities, so the final fail-safe pulls the house back to my birth world. I see. Artoria nodded. I'm also adding more. Got a guy who's scouring the market for more of the same to add to my arsenal. I explained. Several thousand staves all firing in tandem will slow down most things below a god. How much magical energy will that take? Rin also looked around. A lot, but not as much as you would first assume. I smiled. Again, interesting, but I'm running on fumes here. Rin yawned once more. Bed? I have a few rooms set up, I'll show them to you so you may pick one. Jin happily suggested. And like that, you're my favorite genie. Rin accepted immediately, barely even waiting for acknowledgement before pulling Jin away. You going with her? I asked Artoria. I admit to being mentally exhausted through the adventure. She looked a little hesitant. I know I have been away for a while and we have not spent much time together. I flicked her forehead, earning a little surprised noise from her. You don't need to explain yourself to me. Just because we're in a relationship doesn't mean we have to involve ourselves with every moment of each other's lives. I did wrap my arms around her. The time we spent apart did make me miss her. You get to have your own time, your own adventures. I'll always be here waiting for you, just like how you were for me when I was jumping around. Will. She whispered, burying her head in my chest. You have been very good to me. I don't know what to say, I am very happy with you as my boyfriend. You're so cute it makes it hard for me to let you go. I kissed her forehead. Once you've rested for a bit and Rin regains her bearing, I hope you can join me in some sparring. Sparring? She perked up. I've been picking up my training recently. I was going to head over to Thorum and work on my Thursday with him as well. I would be happy to spar with you, Wilhelm. She smiled brightly. Mayhaps we seek out Sasaki Kojiro for some bouts with him as well. That is a brilliant idea. I completely forgot about him. I suppose Rin is probably getting impatient, waiting for you. She grunted. Rin is still very on guard. Oh. I blinked at her statement. Having to constantly be on the lookout for days at a time, I hadn't even considered how she was still stressing over certain things like that even now that she is relatively safe and could let her guard down. It is to be expected. Her last time in such a situation was the Grail War, but she was a bit more naive then. Mayhaps this experience brought up some memories of then. Even so, I think she's handling it well. She only looked tired, not anything else I could see on the surface. I guess we should just keep an eye out. Therapy isn't a bad choice if she does have some issues to work through. Gods know I probably need it as well. Something to consider. Artoria nodded. I should probably go. She looked at me expectantly. I leaned down and pressed my lips to hers, her arm moving up to cup my cheek. Sleep well. I said my goodbyes as we separated. She gave one last smile before shuttling off up the stairs towards the bedrooms. Peeking out the window, the sun was still high up in the sky because it was barely past noon. I just chuckled, opting to go get some training done. I hoped Thorum was available. I popped over to Whiterun and practically made a beeline for the companions building. As I got close, I heard noise, the sound of steel against steel from behind the building in the courtyard. Opting to go check it out, I saw my friend sitting to the side with a cup of water in his hand and sweat dripping down his brow. There were others there, Some I recognized and others I didn't. Actually, there looked to be a few in some guard outfits, partially taken off, training with the companions. My friend! Thorum exclaimed, grabbing everyone's attention. Hey, Thorum! I greeted, even at his sudden shout, and the attention that I now had on me, seeing how happy he was to see me always brought a smile to my face. You disappeared for several days, I had wondered where you had run off to. He stood up, clasping me on the shoulder. Oh, some idiots wanted to make a move on me. Decided to go have a chat with their leader. I briefly explained. I didn't really want to go into the details. I feel like Thorum would be upset that I went and fought the vampires on my own. I also got in some good training. Wonderful. It's always good to keep up with your exercises. Thorum nodded in approval. Red Dragon Emperor. One of the faces I didn't recognize greeted. Wilhelm. Ela nodded to me as well, propping herself up with a warhammer. I thought she used a sword and bow, but I didn't question it. Good to see you again, mage. Farkas also greeted beside her. The way he called me that didn't hold any kind of insult behind it. Perhaps just a simple nickname or acknowledgement on his part. Good to see you lot in good shape. Though I haven't seen some of their other numbers, even when we partied before. I guess they're out on missions, air or they're throughout Skyrim. Thorum hefted Graham over his shoulder. My friend, have you come to join us in training? He gestured to the area. We welcome all who wish to better themselves in these troubling times. Huh, that makes sense then. The companions are probably some of the best this place has to offer for mundane warriors, besides those odd ones. It would do good for the average guard to come on over during their free time. Not to mention the morale boost it would give the troops. I wondered if this was the Jarl's idea or Thorum just coincidentally setting it up by being a good guy. Honestly, I'd give it 50-50 odds. Actually, I did. Oh. Thorum didn't seem to expect my answer. Do you wish to test your blade against me then? He smiled, holding his own sword up in a good-natured taunt. Actually, that sounds like fun. Now that I thought about it, I should make sure I use this opportunity to train with him too. Artoria will probably come by soon. I don't doubt she'd also like to cross blades with you. Your woman, huh? Thorum nodded. I will gladly greet her with my blade when the time comes. But that does not appear to be the reason you are here. You're right. I replied. I wanted your help on my Thursday. To be honest, I've kind of neglected it for other avenues of training. Oh, I would be honored. Thorum let out a laugh. I did say I would teach you a thing or two when we first separated from the throat of the world. It might be a better idea to go to see the Greybeards, they didn't seem to dislike me. But for some reason I felt it more appropriate to learn from Thorum. Someone sounds cocky. I gave a small laugh. How about I teach you a couple things about magic while we're at it? That would be great. I was stuck on my studies and did not know how to proceed. Thorum didn't even hide it. Idiot, if you needed help you just had to ask. Got somewhere we can make a mess? I asked. Well, we can always do it outside the city. Thorum offered. I shrugged. Why not? We can give them a little show too. Might raise the overall spirits of the people here if they can see the Dragonborn shouting without the threat of a dragon burning them. I was looking forward to this. Besides the training, I did have some time to kill. I was waiting for Jin to give me a lead on this so-called Elder Scroll, and for Artoria and Rin to come on over when they're up and rested. I will make sure not to embarrass you too much. He had that big goofy smile on his face. Them be fighting words. I snorted, my lips curling up. Let's see if you can keep up. If you want to support me, check out my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/Kaishin. I tend to polls that decide important plot stuff in my P at Trian. Many thanks to my awesome patrons. Ben Phillips. Yamatancho. Yuki. Search 1301. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be here until next time.